allow me to pose a question to you, Grace, but first I'd like to invite Professor Nida-Rümelin, Knut Weber and Oliver Kutz to join me up here on stage for the discussion. Allow me in the meanwhile, Grace, to pose a first question. You were talking, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you were also in the final part of your presentation talking about different disciplines. So in a way, I don't know, interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, is that what you are asking in order to solve the problems of the world? In what way we have to combine artificial intelligence and let me say interdisciplinary competences? AI has to do a lot with learning. We heard a lot about learning today. So can artificial intelligence learn a certain level of interdisciplinarity?
I think it can learn interdisciplinary things. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the artificial intelligence algorithms are all based on the data that we give it. It learns from data, it learns from patterns. And so if we're feeding it information from a variety of sources, a variety of disciplines, images, videos, sound, I would consider that interdisciplinary learning.
Yeah. Well, let me move to the other participants of this hybrid format of discussion. We have with us also today from Berlin, Dr. Stefan Brandt, the director of the Futurium, the House of Futures in Berlin, which just last year opened its doors. In your exhibitions, visitors can discover many possible futures. You discuss artificial intelligence also in your exhibition. So what is your opinion about the learning, let me say, machines, the learning developments in this context? What can AI at the end of the day do for saving the planet or for supporting the planet?
First, thanks for inviting me. Happy to join you, at least here on a digital way from Berlin. Yes, I think this question is not easy to answer. Also, not for us in the Futurium, because in the Futurium we are not talking about how we will live in the next 30 years. We are talking about how we want to live, what potential futures. This is the reason why we use the plural. Could be out there, and therefore we also discuss the potential of artificial intelligence. We discuss it as a tool that can help us and support us, and there are many great, I think, many great things that can really help and support us. If I think about medicine, if I think about the things that Grace Young just presented there. But I know, of course, and we have Zoltan here, and I'm curious to hear. Of course, there are also scenarios that give artificial intelligence a much broader weight over time and could even make it to one of the, let's say, deciding technological inventions for the future, but we don't know yet how far it will come. For the moment, there are still limitations. We have many, let's say, objects in our Futurium also showing the potential of artificial intelligence. We have artificial intelligence showing how to compose music, for instance, or how to draw pictures and other stuff, but we also see the limitations. So it's not that easy to have it in an interdisciplinary way, for instance. It might be possible, but it's very difficult to achieve. And so for the moment, I would say great tool. It can help a lot it has a potential of danger and risk, but I would not say that it will determine our whole life in the next 50 years.
Thank you, Stefan Brandt. Thank you very much. We will come back to you a bit later. In the meantime, I have another person I still have to introduce. It's Oliver Kutz, who is an AI expert and ontologist from our local university here at Bolzano, and he is the chief organizer of the Bolzano Summer of Knowledge, where participants from different disciplines, again, discuss topics, issues, and challenges related to knowledge in the 21st century. Oliver, what is your impression? So after this 3 short presentations, 20-minute presentations, mostly we have a discussion about technology supporting the humanity, just in order to solve the biggest problems we have. What else? Was it that?
I think it's important to see the scope of what people mean by AI. So many people talk about machine learning, really, and image recognition. And it's not long ago that symbolic AI and logic and reasoning and ontology were important topics of AI. So the spectrum from body enhancement to even solving the smallest problems that simple robots face today is a really huge spectrum here. So I come from an area where we try to sort of bridge the good old-fashioned symbolic AI with embodied cognition. So how humans learn, how humans understand, how humans acquire concepts, and how can we bring these things that we understand about humans also to machines. And this is really something where we are only move forward millimeters, and we're not close to making dramatic leaps to bring the kind of understanding and semantics that humans have to machines. Simple things like learning abstractions, for instance, even of this most simple kind. This is something that machines do not learn. And we have not even a good theory about what abstractions are for machines and how they could, from simple data, being exposed to data, learn non-trivial abstract concepts that they can move around from one situation to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all of you are also invited to bring in some arguments. Let me go back now to Zoltan, Istvan, and Julian, Nida-Rümelin. I have the impression that there is a huge gap between, on one hand, discussions about humanity, and on the other hand, about that what Zoltan Istvan was presenting about transhumanism as a movement, but also as an idea, as an ideology, probably. And, well, Zoltan, technology creates appetite for immortality, but at the same time threatens us with universal extinction. The current crisis, the pandemic crisis we have, has shown us humans that we cannot solve all the problems through science and technology. So what is an argument? You were talking about that we have to revolutionize the field of medicine. But now we have the problems. What can transhumanism do in order to overcome the pandemic problems and situations we have on this planet?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I feel that we should have dealt with the problems years ago. When I was running for president, we were talking about trying to create vaccines for everything that's out there, even cancer someday potentially. But certainly Ebola and SARS and MARS and things like that. But there's not doing enough in terms, the world, politicians, governments, even universities, they're just not doing enough and worrying about existential risk. So it's not a surprise that something like coronavirus has come. It's not a surprise that climate change is happening. It's not a surprise. It won't be a surprise actually to me if one of the 15,000 live nuclear weapons explodes accidentally one day. We are not doing enough in terms of protecting our survival to stop these things. And that's why transhumanists support dealing with existential risk is almost their number one priority. You know, we should have people scanning the stars and spending hundreds of millions on it potentially for asteroid impact, especially knowing the planet's history. But we're not doing that enough. And so what can we do about it? Well, we just have to, you know, bring in more resources and bring in politicians that really believe in this stuff and want to save people before something bad happens rather than deal with the fact afterwards.
Thank you. Let me move to another element which you were discussing a little bit. It was about spirituality and religious aspects. I remember Professor Nida-Rümelin yesterday in the local newspaper of Dolomiten. You had a wonderful interview, and the title of the interview was "We Are Not God." So what about God? What about spirituality when we talk about transhumanism on the one hand, and on the other hand, humanism in a poor sense, as you showed us this today?
Well, there is a close connection between humanism and transhumanism. If you look to the history, one might even say that humanism again and again transforms into some form of transhumanism avant la lettre. What I mean is, for example, the utopian movements, Campanella, Thomas Morus, or later on the anarchists and socialists of the 19th century, utopians too. Yeah. Marx himself, the young Karl Marx, they all were at their starting point humanists. And this humanism then transformed into some way of engineering the human being anew. So Campanella has the idea of creating a new species of man, in a way, and Stalin and maybe even Hitler too. So there's always this danger that humanism that has an ethical, moral impact. So if you understand humans as being responsible and so forth, as I explained, then there are ethical implications. Then we have a duty. Yeah? We should try to make human life on Earth better than it is. So this is against a more conservative attitude that say, well, humans are as they are and we change nothing. Yeah? And now the common ground is use technology in order to make human life on Earth better. Use digital technologies to make life on Earth better. If this reformist and pragmatist attitude is substituted by kind of religious view of, how do you say, of liberating the human conditions from any kind of limitation, then it becomes a kind of religion or ideology. And if you say most transhumanists are not religious, I would say, yeah, that's the same with communists. Communists are, this is a religion itself. And this explains why most transhumanists are not religious, yeah? Because this is a religion, yeah? The idea of an eternal life. This is one of the big promises of all religions, well, most, not all, every, but most religions in the world, yeah? To be free from all the sufferings that are part of the human conditions. That is some promise, but a promise for another life, not this life on Earth, another life. In ancient times, there was the gnosis. This was a very dangerous for the Christian church, a very dangerous movement, yeah, gnosis, that told, well, what Christ told us is not meant as some promise for afterlife. It's something he promised for this life. So we changed the Roman Empire in a way that paradise is on Earth. And you might say in that sense that some ideologies like communism are versions of Gnosis. So, yeah. And I get the impression that transhumanism, with all these interesting ideas, yeah, I accept all these ideas. How can we make life better in using digital technologies? Then loses its ground and changes into kind of religious ideology, spiritual ideology.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Nida-Rümelin. Just a minute back to Zoltan Istvan. So basically, as I understood it, I understood Nida-Rümelin's speech in a way that we try to bring this spiritual level back to the earth, and then we ourselves become like God, and all those proposing these ideas are similar to God, isn't it? So how can we, on one hand, support the planet and support the humanity and basically bring forward these ideas, for example, revolutionize the field of medicine? I would also fully agree. But on the other hand, not go over a certain limit, whatever it is.
Well, first, I think most people would say there's no limit, and I certainly don't believe in the limit. I think we can go as far as we want to go. But and also when you talk about even saving the planet, we're talking about what's the best way to do it. Well, many people think a technological fix is the way. And I used to work at Wild Aid in Cambodia, and we dealt with poaching. And it turns out that we were rather unsuccessful in stopping a lot of the poaching that was going on in Southeast Asia. But because of genetic engineering now, they're having much more success probably in the next 5 to 10 years of replenishing populations like the Siamese crocodile through radical science. In fact, through nanotechnology and different types of ways that science is moving forward, I think that's going to be the way that we rehabilitate this planet and actually save it. It's not going to be through not becoming godlike creatures. It's not going to be because we're scared or we're too conservative. We actually have to strive as high and as far as possible in order to reach a point when we can actually fix everything, fix the damage we've done, including inequality amongst people, including people dying from disease, including children being abused and trafficking and stuff. We can create the society we want, but it's going to be through science and technology that we can do that. We shouldn't be afraid of taking that within our grasp and utilizing it in a way that really makes this world the perfect place we want it to be.
Zoltan Istvan, let me now have a look to Knut Weber. When we are talking too much about science, then we have to start to talk about arts. And the theater has to do with the stage. So what comes in your mind when we have this kind of discussions here? You started with the Futurological Congress, and you were in a way also driven by industrial digitalization issues, especially at your location. But what is the objective at the end? What is the idea behind, and what can we follow?
I'm working with theater. It's a very old profession, and we are working 2 months to create a piece, and we rehearsal every day. So I'm a little bit scared about, for example, the influence of AI to art. I am not interested really in some marketing strategies from telecom to continue a not finished opera from Beethoven. That doesn't interest me at all. He didn't finish it, and so we have to accept it. AI will never create, I think, a picture because the human influence to art is very basic. So James Lovelock, the 100-year-old scientist from England, he wrote a book some month ago, which is called Novocene. And he says we are living in at the end of Anthropocene, the age of mankind, and a new age will start, and he calls it Novocene, which is the beginning of the victory of super intelligence, and mankind will just be a spectator in the future. And well, maybe it is good when I see such examples, which we saw tonight at the sea, to save the world. This is very great. But on the other hand, we lose something. We lose our specific mankind identity, and we lose theater, for example, because look at all the plays from Shakespeare, Macbeth. We see the good side and the bad side of man, and this will disappear. So some arts will disappear. Maybe it is not important, but the new time is. It makes me a bit scary. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Knut Weber. Let me move to Grace. In fact, I agree on. So basically, Knut Weber was telling us that probably we would have to accept that Beethoven didn't finish the 10th Symphony. You showed us that your company, and definitely your company is a powerful company, is interested to solve problems of this planet. And I would say the majority of the people being with us here, they agree on that. But what is the objective? Are you interested, and your company interested to create a perfect world? Or should we accept that specific aspects, or we call them problems, we will never be able to solve? What are the problems, and where are limits? Do you have a kind of hierarchy of problems, or are there existing problems which you never will try to solve?
It's interesting. You frame it as if I have to choose between creating a more perfect world or solving some problems, when of course I think we'll always be trying to do both, and there will always be more open problems than anyone could address. In terms of which problems I choose to work on, and we choose to work on at X, we look for what falls in the middle of that Venn diagram I showed. So big problem, and in our sense, that usually means impacting billions of people, like causes significant problems for that size of people. We look for a radical solution in the sense that it might take 10 years to make. If it's a solution that someone can invent in a year or two, it's probably a better thing for another group to work on. We're really looking at long-term moonshot technologies, and I'm fortunate enough that we have the long-term view and patience to work on those long-term challenges. And then the third circle is that we work on breakthrough technologies. Technology is certainly not the solution to every problem. I think we know that. In fact, usually it's just one part of a solution to a problem. We look at problems that can have technology solve a significant portion of them, and we do that because technology is our main wheelhouse, it's our main skill set. But by no means do we think technology is for all problems. So I prioritize problems, and at X we prioritize problems using that Venn diagram, which works for us. Doesn't work for everyone. Everyone needs to have their own rubric.
Stefan Brandt, the title of the discussion is Humanity in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. a very simple question, but probably the most difficult question, how we actually want to live in the future. We hear a lot about the destroying potential of artificial intelligence, destroying democracies, destroying, so taking over military power. Yeah? So at the end, we will not have, as a humanity, anymore have the control over the artificial intelligence and the learning competences behind. So what is Futurium telling us about that?
First, we have a strong belief at the Futurium, and our strong belief is that it's still us that can shape future. So we want to encourage people to shape future in a sustainable way. And we think nobody else than ourselves, than all of us can do it. Each one in its environment with different, of course, ranges of influence, but everybody can participate. And this is what we try to communicate to the people. We are not silencing risks and problems. So we are not painting the future like in pink colors. We try to be very honest, making clear that there are problems and that there are risks. And so we are not talking about artificial intelligence only as a chance, but we are also talking very clear that there are big risks with this technology. But we still, I think we still have the chance and the duty to define rules, guidelines on how this technology can help and support us. And therefore, I also enjoy the ideas of Zoltan, not so much because I believe that we will live in a cloud in 50 years. It's probably nothing I believe personally. But I like about this approach, I like that it has a disruptive potential, a true disruptive potential. And this is bringing us to think about what we want, what's important to us, and what apparent imperfections we also want to accept, and which imperfections are part of our existence. We should talk about imperfections, about insecurities that we are willing to face, not so much about perfection.
Comment that for a moment. I think this is a very important point, the ambivalence of the digital technologies. If you look to the recent past, you can say we are in the meantime in a kind of third phase of digital transformation. The first phase, Turing has been mentioned today, end of Second World War and the first years after, and then the 50s, with the expectation cybernetics is the theory for that, to transform all of economy and politics and social engineering and so on the basis of big computers. And well, we used it, for example, in landing on the moon. It was important to have these big computers. But all these hopes were disappointed, so it didn't take place, and we had something that some call the ice age of digital transformation, so nothing happened more or less till the 90s. And if you look to the economic data, it's interesting to see that during the 90s, with personal computers and World Wide Web, we had a considerable increase of productivity based on these new digital technologies. And the strange thing is that during the last 10, 15 years, the third phase of digital transformation, we do not have that effect. So there is no considerable increase of productivity. And this is true also for the United States or for China and so on and so forth, based on digital technologies. This is not my insight, it's an insight that is sometimes even discussed, but most people don't like to mention it. Robert Gordon has made a big study of the impact of technological innovations for productivity and wealth, and showed that with very detailed studies. So what I draw from that is the following. We do not have to be afraid of losing 50% of the workforce. This is, at least for the moment and probably for the next decade, not really the problem. What we should fear is that we have a big transformation process without reaching the main goals. So some were mentioned, poverty, inequality, the environment, climate change, and so on and so forth, because the whole process is driven by mere commercial interests. And I think to get some form of political shaping this development with human and political goals is necessary in order to use these technologies in a humane and fruitful way.
Thank you, Professor Nida-Rümelin. In fact, that was one of my questions I prepared. What about equal opportunities? Especially also the crisis, the coronavirus crisis, has now once again clearly shown us what gaps are opening up in societies, in medical care as well. So how solve this problem of governance and problem of how politicians act and go to reach clear objectives. So this has indirectly to do with the risks we discussed also with Stefan, Brandt. Can I, Oliver Kutz, ask you about the risks? So what about the risks of artificial intelligence? Sorry. Is this a discussion normally, or is there more hype? And very often hypes, they cover the real problems behind. So what about the risks of artificial intelligence?
Well, is this on? The risks are plenty, obviously. One main problem is that they are most intelligent toasters to some degree. There's a lot of high-performing systems that can do some task X well, and we don't exactly know how they do it and how they come to their decision. This is why in the European Union we now have a huge program on creating explainable AI, which is figuring out how the machines come to their decisions and extracting from whatever this machine does and the algorithm is something that is human understandable. And this is a huge problem because we have no idea what these networks do. So most of these very high-performing image recognition, also the chess-playing software, almost any high-performing AI software that is most of the time based on deep learning and things like this, you cannot extract any meaningful high-level information out of these high-performing AIs, which it makes it very hard to lift this to a human level and explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how we should deal with their decision-making. And so the features that they produce or that they base their decisions on, they're too many, and we don't know how to reorganize this into something that's meaningful for people. And this has to change. So the focus really is very important to look into this, because otherwise these will be just, we have no idea, especially in the legal domain, in the medical domain, if we pump a lot of money into medical AI and they do something well, but next moment they might chop your head off because they were not thinking much about it. So I mean, this is a very real problem, and there's not really good solutions to this at all.
There is a question: are driverless cars and AI doctors really desirable?
Cars more than doctors.
If I may answer this, well, there are 5 levels of more or less autonomous cars. So this is, And autonomous cars in the literal sense are only those who are fit for level 5. So level 5 means you have no chance to intervene. There is no driver, there's no wheel, no brake. So this is the idea. And till recently, most firms said, well, this is our goal and we will reach it in the near future. In the meantime, there's a certain change in attitude, it seems to me, with having many discussions. And the reason is not so much that it is not viable. I think it is viable. One could reach that goal, but only in changing the whole traffic system, city development strategies. For example, one had to separate carefully between autonomous cars and not autonomous cars. For example, if you have mixed zones of traffic, as it is quite à la mode for the moment, in many middle cities, the autonomous cars wouldn't move a meter. So if it's crowded, because they have to act very carefully. And so others, usually you look, well, is he going, is he not going, and so on and so forth, and you communicate in that sense. This form of communication, nodding, saying that this will take decades till we reach there. And then the question arises, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because in the end, you have a huge investment for a form of traffic that is obsolete, because we should, in the near future, change to wholly different systems of public transport. So why keeping up with individual traffic? That is a technology that has no future. So I am quite skeptical. Use the digital tools in order to reduce traffic accidents. Use it as it can be financed and used by the persons. So, but this is level 3, maybe level 4, but not level 5.
Thank you very much. With this example, we came back also to the question, what are the central questions? Let me finish. We are under pressure with the time now. I would say we should give the final word to our colleagues from the US, Grace and Zoltan. Some concluding words about humanity in the age of artificial intelligence. Did you learn something now here? Was it okay for you to be part of the Bolzano discussion? Grace?
Did I learn something? Absolutely. Actually, I'm only just now learning about transhumanism and those philosophies. I don't personally desire to be immortal, but there's some really simple things that I would like. We've had these horrible wildfires raging across California the last couple of weeks. The sky was bright orange outside, and I would like to be able to breathe outside. So it sounds like quite non-controversial, but I suppose with these conditions, it might require some transhumanist technology. I would love to be able to go to the grocery store without getting COVID. We're having a big problem with it in my county here. And again, that's probably something less controversial on the scale of transhumanist technologies, but those are what I'm thinking about right now.
Zoltan, Istvan, a short feedback. We can't hear you.
My apologies, I had myself on mute. But thank you so much for having me at the Futurological Congress. It's been wonderful, and I just amazing to hear so many wonderful speakers. But if I just am going to leave you with something, it's this idea that while the future seems frightening, and sometimes we're scared of the brave new things that can happen to the human species and to our planet, we should embrace it because we have a long history of the world working in our favor when we tackle innovation and we utilize it in humanity. And I think there's something very functional about trying to make the human species better and embracing that, regardless how much we end up transforming ourselves. And that's really what the future is about. It's something we don't know. That's why it's a little bit scary or a little bit odd, but we chase after it, we explore it, we go for it, because it's sort of in our DNA to improve. It's in our DNA to want to survive and to live. And I don't mind taking that as far as we can go. And I think, I hope everyone else will agree with that. I think it's going to be a beautiful future.
To Julian Nida-Rümelin, Zoltan Istvan, Grace Young, Stefan Brandt, Knut Weber and Oliver Kutz. We had a really interesting but also very short discussion about humanity in the age of artificial intelligence. Thank you very much. It was really, really interesting, and we definitely have to continue with this discussion and go a bit more into detail on some arguments. It was great. Just announcing that in Seminar 2 there is Transfiguration performance, and on the big place behind the building there is also on the Piazza Neu there is the Emmental music tape sound installation by Symphocat from Russia. You are invited to participate in the offer of Trans Art. Thank you very much again for staying so long with us. Thanks to you, colleagues from the US, and especially from the eastern part of the US, were able to be part of us. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.